In the mid-17th century, the world was held together by water. Oceans were not barriers, they were highways. And on these highways, two titans emerged, their shadows stretching across the globe. In the bustling ports of Amsterdam and Rotterdam, the Dutch Republic, a small nation of merchants and sailors, had built a global empire of trade. Their ships, laden with spices from the East Indies and silver from the Americas, were the lifeblood of the world economy. But across the Channel, another power was stirring. England, with its own ambitions, watched the Dutch dominance with growing envy. Along the River Thames, English shipyards were busy, their docks filled with warships and merchant vessels eager for a piece of the prize. The tension was palpable. To maritime giants, one ocean, and no room for both. The stage was set for a conflict that would define an era, a series of wars fought not for land, but for the very soul of the sea itself. The first spark came from a declaration of economic warfare. England's Parliament passed the Navigation Acts, a direct challenge to Dutch trade, decreeing that all goods coming to England must be carried on English ships. On the high seas, English captains began stopping and searching Dutch vessels, a bold provocation. Flags were raised, cannons were primed, and the air grew thick with pride and defiance. War was no longer a possibility, it was an inevitability. In 1652, the First War erupted. This was not the elegant, organized naval warfare of later centuries. It was raw, chaotic, and brutal. Fleets of wooden ships clashed in a maelstrom of close-range cannon fire. The air filled with smoke, the deafening roar of artillery, and the splintering crash of timber. On smoke-filled decks, sailors fought hand-to-hand amidst fallen masts and tangled rigging. Legends were forged in the crucible of battle. Men like the Dutch Admiral Martin Tromp and England's Robert Blake. It was a messy, desperate struggle, a glimpse into the raw violence of early naval conflict. When the fighting paused, it wasn't a true peace. It was a breath, a moment for the two exhausted giants to rearm. The years between the wars saw a frantic arms race. Shipyards worked day and night, building bigger, more powerful ships of the line. Admirals studied tactics, developing the disciplined line of battle formations that would turn naval combat into a deadly, organized chess match. The seas were quiet, but it was the tense calm of an ocean holding its breath before the storm. In 1665, the storm broke with unimaginable fury. The Second Anglo-Dutch War was a conflict on a scale never before seen. At the Battle of Lowestoft and the legendary 4 Days Battle, hundreds of ships turned the sea red. The battles were grander, the tactics more sophisticated, but the cost was immense. Entire fleets were engulfed in fire and smoke, burning ships drifting like ghosts through the chaos. Flagships sank, taking their admirals with them. This was not just a war of strategy. It was a war of attrition, a horrific spectacle of destruction that revealed the devastating human cost of the struggle for supremacy. Then came the moment that would forever haunt the English psyche. In 1667, in a daring and brilliant maneuver, the Dutch fleet under Admiral Mitchell de Ruyter did the unthinkable. They sailed up the River Medway, deep into English home waters. They smashed through the defensive chains, sailed past English forts, and set fire to the pride of the English Navy as it lay at anchor. The Royal Charles, England's flagship, was captured and towed back to Holland as a trophy. In London, there was panic. It was a shocking, profound humiliation and naval nightmare from which England would take decades to recover. But the fight wasn't over. The Third War, beginning in 1672, was a struggle for survival. England, now allied with the mighty land power of France, sought to crush the Dutch Republic once and for all. Surrounded by enemies on land and sea, the Dutch faced annihilation. Their fate rested on the shoulders of one man, Admiral Mitchell de Ruyter. Calm, brilliant, and utterly fearless, de Ruyter led his outnumbered fleet in a series of desperate defensive battles. This was no longer a war for dominance, but a fight for the very existence of a nation. Let's pause and imagine the world of the sailor. Life at sea was a brutal existence. Cramped, damp quarters, meager rations, and the constant threat of disease. Before battle, men would say their prayers, knowing they might never see another dawn. When the cannons roared, the decks became a scene of unimaginable horror, splintered wood flying like shrapnel, the cries of the wounded, and blood washing into the sea with the waves. For those who fell overboard, there was no rescue, only a cold, dark grave beneath the waves. This was their reality, a life of exhaustion, fear, and courage in the face of death. In the end, there was no true victor. The wars left both nations exhausted, their treasuries empty, and their fleets battered. Treaties were signed, but the balance of power had fundamentally shifted. The Dutch, though they had held their ground heroically, were financially drained, and their golden age began to wane. England, having learned bitter lessons from its defeats, began a relentless journey of naval reform, building the foundations of what would become the Royal Navy, the future master of the world's oceans. The Anglo-Dutch Wars were more than just a series of battles. They were a turning point in history, a savage epic where the future of empires was decided not on land, but on the waves. Today, the seas are calm, but beneath the surface, on the silent seabed, lie the wrecks of forgotten warships. Torn flags and splintered hulls rest in the dark, a silent testament to the fury that once raged above. Empires may rise on land, but they are forged and broken at sea. The ocean remembers. Thanks for watching.